In today's episode of Radio KD8TTE, we're going to answer a question. When do you use those boxes for received and sent at the bottom of the radiogram form? More generally, we're going to talk about radio message accounting. Stick around. The question arises, how do we keep track of messages that we are receiving to our station and sending from our station? Well, the ARRL's Methods, Practices, and Guidelines document, the MPG, describes this in some detail, though many new traffic handlers find this to be somewhat confusing. We're going to go step by step, showing you exactly how to use those accounting features, and you should be able to see why it's such a good idea. Today we're going to talk about how to account for your radio traffic the right way. The first thing that we want to make sure we get across is you should not just start filling out the form. Lots of newer operators do this and get themselves into trouble pretty quickly. The form is designed for the purpose of organizing the information so that it will be in the right format for transmission. The order in which you complete the form, however, does not necessarily follow beginning to end. In fact, there are things in the preamble up front that you aren't going to know the answer to until you've completed things down below. Before we can account for our activity correctly, we need to understand what the activity of radio messaging entails. There are 4 distinct steps in radio messaging. The first is origination, getting a message from a person to the format necessary for transmission. This is not stuff that we do on the air. There is then relay, sending a message from one station to another on the air. There is receiving of a message that is also relay, it's just the other side of it, again taking place on the air. The 4th step is delivery, that is taking the written message as it was transmitted, turning it into something that can be handed to a person and be understood. Again, this is activity that does not take place on the air. First, we will talk about origination. This is usually on behalf of another person. This is why we call it sometimes third-party traffic. Origination is taking the thoughts of one person and organizing it for transmission. We need to know 2. That is, the addressee. Who is going to receive this message? We need to know from. What is the name of the person? How does the person get identified when signing the message? We have the text of the message. What is the message actually going to say? What does the recipient need to know? Then we have the preamble. This actually goes up top, and this is the information necessary for radio operators to move the message effectively. When we're talking about origination, we need to look at the MPG Chapter 1. Section 1.0.2 gives an example radiogram with all of the parts numbered so that we can see each one individually and understand what its role is. In this video, we are going to focus on accounting, so we're not going to go step by step through the entire radiogram form. What we see in the bottom left is the section that deals with origination. So the origination record is so that if somebody asks a question, where did some message come from? If it gets traced all the way back to the station that brought that message on air, we have the ability to see the person. How did that actually get handed off? Origination will also include the time and date, which would allow us to see if there's any delay between getting the message from the person who needs it and for it to get in the process of being relayed. All of this happens off air. There's no radio stuff happening yet. The idea is completing the form helps us to make sure that we get the message in the proper format so that when it comes time for relay, it's ready to go. So let's take a look at the standard radiogram form. The first thing that we notice is in the bottom left, there is no box for origination separate from what we see in the received box. Now, the reason for the MPG having these additional fields is that it helps to break down the process a little bit more easily so that we can see the difference between origination and receiving a message over the air. In practice, however, we're going to use that received box anytime that we are getting a message from somebody else, including during the process of origination. So we're going to have all of the information necessary for the radio station operators to identify how they got that message that ultimately got relayed off of their station. We need to know the name of the person who gave it to us. If we are in a served agency situation, we might need to know even a title or a role. We would need to know whether it was handled verbally, whether it was by an in-house phone, whether it was a written message that was handed. In any case, we need to know that information. Where did we get this message? And record the date and time that we got the message. So again, in origination, we got it from a person, not from a station. That means that if you're a radio operator staffing a station like W8SGT and you are originating a message for somebody we're going to call B. Jones, then you got that message from B. Jones. Even if B. Jones is an amateur radio operator and has a personal station with its own call sign, you got it from B. Jones, not from the station's call sign. One detail that we want to point out is that the received box, which tells us how we got that message, works in conjunction with the station of origin. The way that that works is that when the message is on the station W8SGT, when that has the record, and we see that the station of origin is W8SGT, then we understand this message was originated here. Therefore, what we have in the received box down in the bottom left certainly was not radio relay, but was somebody handing us the message, telling us the message, or in some other way giving us information that we, the station operators, turned into a message for relay. Once again, your call sign, the station operator, it doesn't matter. The call sign of the person who wants to have the message created, if he's got one, doesn't matter. You are operating the station, and that is the station of origin, and the person at this stage is giving you the information, not a station, so it's their name, their title, and so on that gets recorded down in the received box. We have the ability, as this form is completed, to see the message status. If we are operating at W8SGT, we can see the station of origin of this message is W8SGT. We can tell the status of this message is unsent because it was originated here, but when we look in the bottom right corner, the sent box, it's empty. We received the message from someone, so it is going to be what we've captured in the text. The message is originated, that is, we've completed all of the necessary information to make this good for transmission. W8SGT is the station where we are, sent is empty, so we know that this station needs action and it needs to be moved from this station forward. After a message has been originated, it needs to be relayed. That is the act of moving the message from one station to another. The station that is holding the message must handle it. That means it gets relayed, it gets delivered, or it can be serviced. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. But in any case, we need to handle it. We don't just silently sit on the message and fail to act. The accounting for our handling happens at each step, and it happens for every station involved in the process. First, we'll take a look at relay, the act of sending it. So we have W8SGT holding this message, and we need to move it. This message is for W8OMR in Columbus. So in our example, W8SGT is joining a net and lists traffic, a message for W8OMR Columbus. W8OMR is not on the net, however, so now what do you do? In a message handling net, it is common for the receiving station, ultimately the destination, not to be on the same net. This is not a problem. The traffic relay system is designed for the purpose of being able to address this situation. W8OMR is not in the net, so net control will direct another station, perhaps one that is closer to W8OMR or one that is on a net that W8OMR frequents, and have that station pick up the traffic and go to that other net to hand off to W8OMR. That is, in fact, what happens in this example. Net control directs a station, W8THV, known to be able to communicate with W8OMR, to take the message. W8THV calls W8SGT and says, "Ready to copy?" W8SGT transmits the message. W8SGT, when transmitting that message, will listen for the receiving station, W8THV, for that operator to say Roger, or if this is being done by code or radio telegraphy, to send the signal QSL. That means that the message has been handled. It is no longer on the station W8SGT, and it is now on the station W8THV. In the bottom right corner, sent, W8SGT, the sending station, will record the call sign of the receiving station and the date and the time that the receiving station said Roger and accepted responsibility for that message. Looking at exactly the same transaction but from the side of the receiver, we can see how the process works in the handoff being complete. Again, W8SGT is in a net. It has traffic for W8OMR. W8OMR is not in the net. W8THV is. Net control directs W8THV to call W8SGT to receive traffic for W8OMR. W8THV calls W8SGT and receives the message. The receiving station will record in the bottom left the call sign of the station that transmitted the message to them. Once the receiving station has all of the parts of the message and sends Roger or QSL, the receiving station will record in the bottom left corner the received box, the date and time along with the call sign of the sending station. In such a way, we have both the sending and the receiving station recording the handoff of the message from the sending station to the receiving station. Now we can see that this message needs action at station W8THV because the received box is complete. We have received this message. We take a look at the 2 up in the top area, sort of to the left, and we can see that it is for some other station or some other person. And when we look at the bottom right, sent is empty. That means this message is on our station W8THV and requires action. Once again, we can do only 3 things with this. We can relay it, we can deliver it, or we can service it, which means we cancel the message and send a message back to the station of origin telling them that we've canceled it and why, or asking a question about it. In any case, we must act on the message. Because W8THV is holding this message, and it is a message that is going to another station, W8THV is going to send this just the way that W8SGT did in the first place. So we have W8THV entering a net. That net also has W8OMR, and net control will now direct W8OMR to call W8THV to receive that message. W8THV will send the message as directed, and in the bottom right will record the station, date, and time of the transmission. That is to say, the station that received the message, we have the call sign, and the date and time that the receiving station said Roger or sent QSL is recorded in the bottom right. The message is now handled from the perspective of W8THV. At this point, the traffic, the message, can be filed. It shouldn't be 0 days that we keep it, but it shouldn't be forever either. Each station will have some policy. You want to be able to answer questions about the message should one come back to you. Many stations keep the traffic for 30 days so they can answer those questions, but what you do will depend on your station policy, and if it's an agency, you'll need to know what that agency policy is. Taking a look again at this same process from the perspective of the receiving station, that is W8OMR receiving it from W8THV, it's the same transaction just from the other side. W8OMR calls W8THV to receive the message. All of the parts are in. W8OMR's operator says Roger or sends QSL. The message is now on the station W8OMR. The bottom left shows the station that transmitted the message and the date and time that the W8OMR operator said Roger or sent QSL. That, of course, will match the record that is in the sending station's sent box. Once again, this is a message that is going to need action once it is on our station. We have the options always: relay, deliver, or service. In this particular case, this is a little bit interesting. We can see in the to field for this message that it is supposed to go somewhere care of this station W8OMR. And so that means that we can do something with it. In fact, W8OMR knows how to deliver that message. We know where that's going. So there is a box that shows up on some of the pre-printed radiogram forms on the right side above the text where the message has been received. In that case, we put the information about the station that received this message. Now, once again, when we take a look at this, we see we're not going to be moving this any further by way of radio. That does not mean that we're done. We are delivering. So, W8OMR now has the message. W8OMR can read the addressee and understand how to make delivery. W8OMR has not yet made delivery, so the sent part in the bottom right remains empty. So once again, what's the status of this message? W8OMR has the message. W8OMR has the ability to make the delivery without using the radio. And so when we see in the bottom right that the sent box is empty, that means W8OMR needs to act on it. We're going to deliver. It could be by phone. It could be by hand delivery or by courier. It could be posted to a message board if there is a disaster area that we're operating in. It could be by intra-office mail. However it gets delivered, we know because that sent box is empty, that delivery has not yet happened. The process of delivery is giving the written message to the addressee, who is named in the to field, in such a way that it will make sense to them. The station that is holding the message for delivery must handle it. We're not talking about radio stuff, but the accounting is going to continue just as it does with every other step along in the process. So in this particular example, we're going to look at the idea of delivery by email, local email. In this particular case, we have the RT operator at the station W8OMR has received this message and is now in the process of delivery. Drafting up an internal email message to VV Resourceful, who is going to be over in the S4 as indicated by the routing information up in the to field. That station is able to understand what that means, and so we'll direct it to the right place. In cases of dealing with members of the public, it might be something like a name and a phone number, a name and an address. It could even have an email address in there. In any case, the station making delivery has the information necessary to do so without using radio relay. When making delivery, never just throw a message at somebody and expect them to make sense of it. Calling somebody up on the phone and saying ARL 50, I spell Foxtrot India, and going on like that does nobody any good. The fact of the matter is, it probably is actually doing some damage. When you are delivering the message, recognize that you are sending something to somebody. This is the counterpart of the process that started in the very beginning, origination. A person talking like a real person, getting a message out. This is taking the message as it was formatted for transmission and turning it back into something that a real person is actually going to make sense of. So, you need to interpret the message and to present it in such a way that the reader is going to understand it. In this example, we have an ARL numbered radiogram. ARL 53 doesn't mean anything to somebody who is not an amateur radio traffic handler. In that case, the delivering station needs to do the work of looking up ARL 53, filling in the blanks, and turning the message into something that is sensible, as we see on the left side. You might want to include a copy of the radiogram just for reference. Sometimes people like to see those, especially if it's a birthday greeting or something that's being sent as a novelty. In any case, when the delivery is made, the bottom right sent field is completed. Once again, we are not sending to a station, we are sending to a person. And so this is the difference between relay sending and delivery sending, is when we deliver, we send to a person, and we probably want to include information necessary to see how we made that delivery. In this case, we delivered to vresourceful/email and the time that actually took place. And take a look, it does in fact match the date time in the email. It's not necessary that this is going to be precise down to the second, but we do want to make sure that these things match up and we have the ability to follow this through its process if we have to trace it backward. So once again, let's go back to the standard radiogram form. There is no origination part. That's just fine. We're going to use the received field because anytime that we receive the message from somebody else, we are receiving the message. If we're receiving it from a person, we can put their name, their title, and so on in place. If we are receiving it from a station, we will put the call sign of the station from which we are receiving it. When we are sending, we are going to be sending either to another station, in which case we have the call sign recorded in the bottom right, the sent box. But if we are making delivery, we are sending it to a person. So a name, a title, and so on will appear in the sent box for delivery. In any case, we know that the message has been handled by taking a look at the completed form. The question arises, if we have a station that is in contact with a station like W8SGT and sends some kind of tactical message, hey, tell the guys thanks for coffee. Does that mean that origination has taken place when somebody said on the radio, tell those guys thanks for the coffee? Now, the answer is no. Origination takes place when that thought that has been expressed gets turned into the format necessary for relay. That is the process of origination. So it doesn't matter whether it actually takes place on the air, whether it takes place via email, whether it takes place via post-it note, or somebody standing next to a radio operator speaking the message that they want to have transmitted. Origination is the process of putting that thought into the format necessary for transmission. When we have proper message records, we have the ability to trace the message as it moves from station to station, and that can help us to find problems. If a message has been garbled, for example, if a message has been delayed, any of those kinds of concerns might cause us to trace the message as it made its way through the relay system. And when we do that, finding problems, that tells us what we can fix and helps us to make sure that we continue to improve as we are handling messages for third parties. If you have any questions or comments, I'm very interested to hear from you. You can contact me by radiogram at KD8TTE in Bexley, Ohio, 43209. You can contact me by WinLink, KD8TTE, or internet email, KD8TTE at pm.me. Thanks very much for watching. I look forward to hearing from you. Please do like the video and share it if you found it helpful, and subscribe to the channel to help others see that this is a good place for finding radio training. Until next time, this is KD8TTE out.